Hello and welcome to Global Book Guild. Imagine meeting the perfect couple, a charming, successful husband, a beautiful, graceful wife, a perfect home, a perfect life. From the outside, everything looks like a dream. But what if I told you that behind the doors of that perfect house, something terrifying is happening? What if the husband everyone admires is hiding a secret so dark that no one would believe it? Today we're diving into a chilling psychological thriller inspired by Behind Closed Doors. Doors, a story about love, manipulation, and the terrifying truth that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones we trust the most. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Global Book Guild for more powerful book stories and summaries.
And tell me in the comments,
which country are you watching from? Now turn down the lights, relax, and let's step inside a house where everything seems perfect, but nothing is what it seems. When people first meet Grace and Jack Angel, they are introduced to each other by their mutual friend, who has known them for a while. They see what appears to be the perfect marriage. Jack is the kind of man everyone admires immediately. He is handsome, confident, and successful. As a respected lawyer, he is known for defending women who have been victims of domestic abuse. His reputation in the community is almost heroic. People often say that he is the type of man every woman dreams of marrying. Grace, his wife, is equally admired. She is elegant, calm, and charming. Whenever she attends social gatherings, people are drawn to her gentle personality and graceful manner. Together, Jack and Grace seem like a couple who have everything: love, success, and a beautiful life. Their home reflects that same image of perfection. It is a large, stylish house located in a quiet neighborhood. The rooms are carefully decorated, the garden is perfectly maintained, and every detail of their life appears carefully organized. Friends and neighbors often talk about how lucky Grace must be. Jack seems incredibly devoted to her. He rarely leaves her side. At dinner parties, he fills her glass before she asks, remembers her favorite meals, and often finishes her sentences as if he knows her thoughts perfectly. To everyone watching from the outside, it looks like a love story. But sometimes perfection can hide something much darker. Some of Grace's friends begin to notice small details that feel slightly unusual. Grace never answers her phone. If someone calls her, Jack is usually the one who answers. When friends invite Grace to lunch or coffee, she almost always declines politely, explaining that she already has plans with Jack. At first, people assume this is simply the behavior of a newly married couple who enjoy spending time together. But the pattern continues. Grace never goes anywhere alone. Jack drives her everywhere. Even when friends visit their home, Jack stays close to Grace as if he never wants to be separated from her. Some people begin to find his devotion romantic. Others begin to feel something slightly uncomfortable. There is also something else that makes people curious. Despite hosting beautiful dinner parties, Grace has never invited anyone to stay overnight. Guests are always welcomed warmly, but they always leave before the night grows too late. No one has ever seen the upstairs hallway of the house. No one has ever seen every room in the home. And no one has ever asked why. Because from the outside everything appears perfect. But behind the carefully arranged smiles and the charming conversations, Grace is living with a secret that no one around her can see. Every morning when she wakes up, she reminds herself of one terrifying truth. The man everyone admires, the man everyone trusts, the man everyone believes is her perfect husband, is the same man who has turned her life into a prison. And the most frightening part of all is that no one would ever believe her if she told them the truth. Because Jack Angel is known for protecting women, not destroying them. If you asked anyone in the neighborhood about Jack Angel, they would describe him as the perfect gentleman. He is the kind of man who makes a strong first impression the moment he enters a room. Tall, confident, well-dressed, and always polite, Jack has a calm and controlled way of speaking that makes people instantly trust him. But what truly makes him admired is his career. Jack is a successful lawyer who specializes in defending women who have suffered from domestic abuse. In court, he fights passionately to protect victims and punish the men who have hurt them. To many people, Jack is not just a lawyer, he is a hero. Women who have been through terrible situations often thank him for helping them rebuild their lives. Community members speak highly of him, praising his dedication and compassion. Whenever his name is mentioned, people usually say the same thing. What an incredible man. And because of this reputation, no one ever questions him. Jack knows exactly how to present himself to the world. He smiles at the right moments. He listens carefully when people speak. He remembers small details about others, which makes them feel important and valued. To everyone around him, Jack appears thoughtful and caring. But Grace begins to notice something unusual very early in their relationship. Jack seems to observe everything. When they are at a restaurant, he pays attention to every movement she makes. When she speaks to someone else, his eyes quietly follow the conversation. At first, Grace believes this behavior is simply part of his attentive personality. She feels special. She feels protected. Jack showers her with compliments and attention. He sends flowers unexpectedly and plans romantic dinners that seem almost too perfect. He also speaks often about how important loyalty is in relationships. According to Jack, trust between a husband and wife must be absolute. He believes that couples should share everything and never keep secrets from each other. Grace agrees with him. At the time, his words seem wise and sincere. But slowly, Jack begins making small suggestions about Grace's life. He suggests that she doesn't need to work anymore. He tells her that his income is more than enough to support them both. He says he wants her to focus on enjoying life instead of worrying about responsibilities. Grace hesitates at first, but Jack insists gently. "You deserve to relax," he tells her. "Let me take care of everything." Eventually she agrees. Then Jack begins suggesting other changes. He encourages her to spend less time with certain friends who he claims might not understand their relationship. He prefers when they spend evenings at home instead of going out. Whenever Grace mentions meeting someone for coffee or lunch, Jack politely reminds her that they already have plans together. He never raises his voice. He never appears angry. But somehow his words always guide Grace toward the decision he wants. Slowly, her world begins to shrink. Without realizing it, Grace finds herself spending more and more time inside the house. Her social circle becomes smaller. Her independence fades. But Jack continues behaving like the loving husband everyone believes he is. He cooks beautiful meals. He holds her hand in public. He looks at her with admiration when others are watching. To outsiders, Jack Angel remains the perfect man. But inside the quiet walls of their home, Grace begins to sense something deeply unsettling. Because behind Jack's calm smile, there is a control so subtle that most people would never notice it. And Grace is slowly beginning to realize that the man she married may not be the man she thought he was at all. Looking back, Grace sometimes wonders if the warning signs were always there, and she simply chose not to see them. When she first met Jack Angel, everything felt exciting and almost magical. He appeared in her life at a moment when she had grown tired of disappointment. Most relationships she had experienced in the past had been uncertain or temporary. Jack was different. From the very beginning, he made it clear that he knew exactly what he wanted. And what he wanted was Grace. Their first meetings felt effortless. Jack was attentive, charming, and incredibly confident. He asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully to everything Grace shared about her life. But what impressed her most was his reaction when she told him about her younger sister Millie. Millie was very important to Grace. Because of her condition, she needed constant care and attention. Grace had spent many years making sure Millie felt safe and supported. In the past, this responsibility had made relationships difficult. Many men felt uncomfortable about the idea of Millie eventually living with them. But Jack reacted differently. Instead of hesitation, he showed enthusiasm. He asked questions about Millie, about her personality, her hobbies, and the things that made her happy. He even joked that the three of them could become a perfect little family. For Grace, this felt like a miracle. Finally, she believed she had met someone who understood her life completely. And Jack seemed determined not to waste any time. Within weeks, their relationship became very serious. Jack called her every day. He planned romantic outings and introduced her to his colleagues. Everywhere they went, people spoke highly of him. which only strengthened Grace's trust. Soon Jack began talking about the future, not just distant plans but immediate ones. He spoke about marriage with certainty, as if the decision had already been made. At first, Grace laughed nervously when he mentioned it. It felt too soon. But Jack had a way of speaking that made everything sound reasonable. He explained that when two people know they are right for each other, waiting only wastes precious time. Life is short, he told her gently. When you find the person who completes you, you hold on to them. His words were romantic, and Grace wanted to believe them. Friends and acquaintances were surprised when they heard the news of the engagement. Some people quietly wondered if things were moving too quickly, but Grace defended Jack. She believed that love sometimes arrived suddenly and powerfully. Why delay happiness? The wedding itself was beautiful and elegant. Surrounded by smiling guests, Grace felt certain she had made the right decision. Jack looked proud and affectionate as he stood beside her. Everyone admired the couple. Everyone believed they were witnessing the beginning of a perfect life together. But there was something Grace did not notice during the excitement of those early days. Jack had carefully guided every step of their relationship. He had chosen the pace. He had chosen the plans. And now that they were married, Grace would soon realize something frightening. The charming man she fell in love with was about to reveal a completely different side of himself. And once that side appeared, there would be no easy way back. After the wedding, Grace moved into Jack's beautiful home, believing she was beginning a peaceful new chapter of her life. But first, everything seemed exactly as she had imagined. The house was large, elegant, and perfectly organized. Every room looked as if it had been designed carefully for comfort and beauty. The kitchen was spotless, the living room filled with soft lighting and tasteful decorations, and the garden outside was always perfectly maintained. Jack appeared to be the same loving husband she had fallen in love with. He cooked elaborate meals, filled the house with fresh flowers, and often surprised Grace with thoughtful gestures. When guests visited, he treated her with admiration and affection, always making sure she looked happy and comfortable. To anyone watching from the outside, their marriage seemed perfect, but slowly, small details began to feel different. At first, Grace couldn't quite explain the feeling. It wasn't something obvious or dramatic. Instead, it was a series of quiet moments that left her slightly uneasy. Jack began creating strict routines for their daily life. Dinner had to happen at exactly the same time every evening. Certain rooms in the house were always kept locked. Jack preferred that Grace stay inside the house during the day rather than going out. Whenever Grace mentioned visiting a friend or going shopping alone, Jack would gently suggest another plan. "Why don't we go together later?" he would say calmly. At first, Grace believed these were simply habits of a man who liked order and structure, but the rules slowly became more noticeable. Jack didn't like it when Grace answered the phone without him nearby. He insisted that most calls should go through him. If Grace received a message from a friend, Jack often asked detailed questions about the conversation. None of this happened with anger or shouting. Jack remained calm and polite, but his words always carried a quiet authority that made Grace feel uncomfortable disagreeing with him. Then one evening, something happened that changed everything. Grace had been organizing some things upstairs when she noticed a door at the end of the hallway. She had walked past it many times before but had never really thought about it. This time she stopped. The door was unusual. Unlike the other doors in the house, this one had a heavy lock. Curiosity made her reach for the handle. It was locked. Later that evening, when Jack returned home, Grace asked him about the room. She tried to sound casual. "Why is that door always locked?" she asked with a small smile. For a moment, Jack didn't answer. Then he smiled back at her. But something about the smile felt different. Cold, controlled. "It's just a storage room," he said calmly. "There's nothing interesting inside." Grace nodded politely and didn't ask any more questions. But from that moment, something in her mind began to change. The locked door stayed in her thoughts. Why would a simple storage room need such a strong lock? And why had Jack's reaction felt so strange? Days passed, and the curiosity slowly turned into quiet fear. Grace began noticing how carefully Jack watched her. how often his eyes followed her movements, how he seemed to anticipate every question before she asked it. Then one night, Jack surprised her. He stood in the hallway and held up a key. His expression was calm, but his eyes held a strange intensity. "You wanted to see the room," he said softly. "Well, tonight you can." Grace didn't know it yet, but the moment the door opened, her life was about to change forever. When Jack stood in the hallway holding the key, Grace felt a strange feeling in her chest, part curiosity, part fear. For days the locked door had stayed in her thoughts. She had tried to ignore it, convincing herself that it was probably nothing important, just a storage space, like Jack had said. But now Jack was offering to show her what was inside. The hallway felt unusually quiet that night. The lights were dim, and the house seemed strangely still. Jack walked slowly toward the door at the end of the corridor. His footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor. Grace followed behind him. Something about the moment felt wrong, but she couldn't explain why. Jack stopped in front of the door and held up the key. For a brief second, he looked directly into Grace's eyes. His expression was calm, but there was something else behind it, something cold. Then he unlocked the door. The heavy lock clicked loudly in the silent hallway. Jack opened the door slowly. Grace stepped inside. The room was nothing like she expected. There were no windows. The walls were plain and empty, painted in a dull color that made the space feel even smaller. The lighting was harsh and artificial, giving the room a cold and uncomfortable atmosphere. The air inside felt heavy. Grace looked around, confused. There was an event. Almost nothing in the room. Just a simple bed, a small chair, and thick metal locks attached to the outside of the door. For a moment, Grace couldn't understand what she was seeing. Then a terrifying realization began to form in her mind. This wasn't a storage room. It was a prison. Her heart started beating faster as she turned toward Jack. He was watching her closely, studying her reaction. Grace tried to laugh nervously. "What is this?" she asked, but Jack didn't laugh. Instead, he stepped into the room and closed the door behind them. The sound of the door shutting made Grace's stomach twist with fear. Jack walked slowly around the room, as if he were proudly showing her something he had carefully prepared. "This room," he said calmly, "is very special." Grace felt her throat tighten. Jack continued speaking in a quiet, controlled voice. "You see, Grace, some people don't understand how important control is." He paused. "They think marriage is about freedom." Jack smiled slightly. "But I believe something different." Grace could barely breathe. Jack walked toward the door and touched the lock. "This room helps people learn discipline." For a moment, the meaning of his words didn't fully register in Grace's mind. Then the truth hit her all at once. Jack had not married her because he loved her. He had married her because he wanted someone he could control completely. Someone who could never escape. Someone who could never expose him. Grace's hands began to tremble. Jack's next words made the fear even worse. "You should be grateful," he said calmly. "Not everyone gets to live in such a beautiful house." Grace realized something horrifying in that moment. To the outside world, Jack Angel was a hero, a man who protected women. But inside this house, behind these closed doors, he was something very different, and no one would ever suspect the truth, because the man everyone admired had carefully built the perfect mask. After that night, Grace's world changed, completely. The beautiful house that once felt comfortable now felt like a cage. Every hallway, every room, every door reminded her of the terrible truth she had discovered. Jack Angel was not the loving husband everyone believed he was. He was a man who enjoyed control, and Grace was now living inside the trap he had carefully built. But the most terrifying part was that no one outside the house could see it. To the world, Grace and Jack still appeared to be the perfect couple. They hosted elegant dinner parties. Jack cooked impressive meals while Grace greeted guests with a polite smile. Friends laughed, drank wine, and admired the couple's beautiful home. And Jack always stayed close to Grace. Sometimes he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Sometimes he finished her sentences. Sometimes he looked at her with what appeared to be loving admiration. But Grace now understood what those gestures really meant. They were reminders, reminders that Jack was always watching, reminders that he was always in control. During these gatherings, Grace played her role carefully. She smiled, laughed at jokes, and acted exactly the way Jack expected her to, because she knew something very important. If she made even the smallest mistake, Jack would punish her later, and the punishment would happen behind the doors that no one else ever saw. But there was another reason Grace forced herself to stay calm, a reason that mattered more than her own safety. Her sister Millie was expected to move in with them soon. Because of her condition, Millie needed a stable home and someone to take care of her. For years, Grace had promised herself that she would always protect her sister. But now that promise had become a terrifying responsibility, because Grace knew exactly what Jack was capable of, and she feared what might happen if Millie ever became trapped in this house too. That fear gave Grace a strange kind of strength. Instead of breaking under the pressure, she began doing something very dangerous. She began observing Jack. Carefully, quietly, Grace paid attention to his routines. She noticed when he left the house for work and how long he stayed away. She watched how he locked certain doors and where he placed the keys. She listened to the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. She studied the small habits that controlled their daily life. Jack believed Grace was completely powerless. He believed fear had already defeated her, but he didn't realize something important. Fear can also make people very patient, and Grace was becoming extremely patient. Each day she pretended to be the same quiet, obedient wife Jack expected, but inside her mind, a plan was slowly beginning to form, a plan that might be her only chance to survive. She knew escaping Jack would not be easy. He was intelligent, careful, and extremely manipulative. If she made one mistake, he would immediately notice, and the consequences could be devastating. But Grace also knew another truth. If she didn't act soon, her sister Millie would eventually arrive at this house, and once that happened, escaping would become even more dangerous. So Grace waited. She watched. She learned. And deep inside, she prepared herself for the moment when everything would change, because sooner or later, the perfect husband everyone admired would make a mistake, and when that moment came, Grace would have only one chance to turn the prison into an escape. For weeks, Grace lived carefully, inside the invisible prison Jack had created. To anyone watching from the outside, nothing had changed. She still smiled during dinner parties. She still played the role of the perfect wife. She still walked beside Jack at social events while people admired their beautiful marriage. But inside her mind, everything was different. Grace was no longer simply surviving. She was planning. Every day she studied Jack's behavior with careful attention. She noticed how he always followed the same routine. He left the house for work at the same time every morning, locked certain doors before leaving, and returned home at almost the exact same hour every evening. Jack liked order. He liked control. And people who rely too much on routine sometimes make predictable mistakes. Grace knew she had to be patient. Acting too quickly could destroy everything. Jack was intelligent and observant. If he suspected that she was planning something, he would become even more dangerous. But time was running out. Soon, Millie would be moving into the house, and Grace knew that if her sister arrived before she escaped, Jack might trap both of them inside his cruel world. The thought terrified her. So Grace began preparing herself for the moment when she would finally act. One afternoon, while Jack was at work, she walked slowly through the house. The silence felt heavy. She stood in the hallway outside the locked room, the room that had once filled her with fear. Now it reminded her of something else, determination. Grace knew she could not fight Jack directly. He was stronger, smarter, and far more experienced at manipulation. But Jack had one weakness, his confidence. He believed Grace was completely broken. He believed she was too afraid to resist him, and that belief made him careless. One evening during dinner, Jack spoke excitedly about Millie's arrival. He described how everything in the house had been prepared for her. Grace felt her heart race as she listened. Jack was smiling. But Grace knew that smile was hiding something terrible. Jack didn't want Millie in the house out of kindness. He wanted her there because it would give him even more control over Grace. But Jack didn't realize something important. Grace had already made her decision. That night, as Jack slept peacefully beside her, Grace stared at the ceiling in the darkness. Her mind was calm. Her fear had slowly transformed into determination. She understood that the next few days could decide everything. Either she would find a way to escape Jack's control, or she might lose the chance forever. For the first time in a long time, Grace allowed herself to imagine freedom. A life where she and her sister could live without fear. A life where the doors of the house would no longer feel like prison walls. But escaping a man like Jack Angel would not be simple. Jack had spent his entire life building a perfect image for the world to see, and people like Jack rarely allow their secrets to be exposed. Grace knew that the moment she tried to break free, Jack would fight back, because for him, control was everything, and losing control was something he could never accept. But Grace was ready, because sometimes the quietest people, the ones everyone believes are powerless, are the ones who surprise the world the most. And Grace had finally reached the moment where fear was no longer stronger than her courage. The doors that once trapped her were about to open. Before we end this story, I want to ask you something. Did you ever imagine that someone who appears so perfect could hide such a dark secret? Stories like this remind us that sometimes the truth about people is hidden far deeper than we expect. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Global Book Guild for more powerful book stories and summaries. And tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from? I love seeing viewers from all around the world joining this community. Until the next story, stay curious, keep learning, and remember that sometimes the most important truths are hidden behind closed doors.